What really struck me about this Keep the Lights Burning Abby was that her fear was precipitated by what ifs, uncertainty. Her fear was all about uncertainty. But when the storm came and when it was time for her to do a job and to save her chickens and to, keep the lights burning, she actually was quite capable, and she wasn't as afraid in the moment of difficulty, but it was the anticipation of it. It was the uncertainty of it. And so,
the responsibility of being, having to be an adult as a child.
Multiple times, it says, what if I can't keep the lights burning?
And this is a real story, correct?
Absolutely.
This is true.
This is a truth. Yeah. It's based on truth.
Right.
Yes.
So I think that's an important thing to point out to the student about fear is that, when the moment comes, we're often gifted with, what we need, to tackle the struggle.
Right.
So, but it's the uncertainty, it's the faith that we need.
Yeah.
But she also, by the end is so tired. And she has
tired of eggs.
She's tired of eggs. Yeah. She's tired of being out in the cold and the wind and just needs an adult to come back.
That scene at the very end is touching.
It is very touching that she's done so well. This is kind of like when we get to Adam of the Road and you see, a child put in an adult situation who has to persevere, and then at the very end just knows that they have succeeded and that the adults in their life are proud of them.
Hello, everyone. Ian here. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Novel Thoughts. This show only happens with your support, and that means the world to us. If you don't know already, all of the books we talk about on Novel Thoughts are available on our website at memoriapress.com, along with a ton of other great resources for homeschool families looking for great literature for their homes and classrooms. Thanks for being here. Now let's get back to the episode. Well, and I think that you also, from an adult reading this, there will come a time when you need to have faith in your children, that you need to be able to say to them, keep the lights burning.
You've got this.
You've got this. I've got to go and do something else.
Yes.
And that's such a great, thing to think about. And that's with Farmer Boy and the Moffats. And, we see these stories of bygone eras where you think, wow, these children have so much freedom. They have, they have so much responsibility and, things that are a little unfamiliar to us, I think, in the modern culture. But it's really interesting to me to see that when the children are given these grander responsibilities and taking these greater risks, it's always in an environment of mercy and forgiveness. And, the risk is usually, well understood, but there's always just sort of compassion for mistakes. And so, I think that that's such an important part in, it's helpful to me as a parent in recognizing that if I'm asking for maturity, it has to be coupled with, a generosity and a forgiveness regarding mistakes, And so I think that's an interesting thing that you point out there.
So the illustrations in this book too some are black and white and some are color, just like some of the books that we've seen in our read alouds so far. So the students will be used, things like that to point out that you've seen this before, and can they remember? They're going to remember the important book was like that because we've talked about it then in kindergarten. And then, for me, the ending of this book, everything just, is okay. She succeeded. Her father comes home. He's very proud of her. But think how worried he was.
Right. He was away from home.
The whole time he was gone. His wife is sick. His children are literally in charge of not just their home and surviving, but, they were out of food. And then had to keep the ship safe. Had they managed to keep the lights on, he had to worry about all of that while he was gone.
That's right.
And so I'm sure he was thrilled to get home too. So it's a perfect little ending after really some suspense and drama, just like Blaze in the Forest Fire. So we are moving to more complicated themes. And then when we move to Peeing, it's
you
the
see
same.
That same kind of
Peeing is more lighthearted, but Peeing certainly is, it's another duck book. So we seem to have a lot of duck books.
And then the Little House, of course, that's the entire thing is about.
That's right.
That is all about home.
About home being so permanent despite what's happening around it.
I mean,
And
we talked
so-
about progress with
Right.
Mike Mulligan. I mean,
Right.
this is
Right.
progress at the
Right.
expense of a place,
Same
of a
author.
home.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right.
Same art, same nice art. And I pointed out to Lee earlier, Ian, and I don't know that you were in here, that the house is actually smiling just based on the way it was drawn.
Yes, with the- I see- yeah.
with the porch.
Yeah.
And then so it's beautiful, right?
Yes.
And then the city moves into the country, the roads are built, the skyscrapers are built. And as you go, first you've got every season in the country that's just beautiful. So we're talking about seasons again.
Right.
And then when you get further along and here comes the city and the house, just by straightening out the lines
It's
of the
sagging
porch,
a little bit.
it is
Yeah.
saddening. And
Yeah.
then finally, you just can barely see. I don't even see it on this page.
Is that where
I've
they
just
build
totally
up the
lost
freeway?
it. I mean,
Yes.
it's just kind of
Yeah.
lost.
And it's
And
grayed
here
out.
it's
It's
totally
lost
gray.
color.
Yes.
And the pacing of this book is great. And I think that's something that you can pay attention to. In the beginning, the seasons, there are very few words on the page. The seasons are happening very slowly, a lot of description, a lot of details about the seasons, a lot of color in the illustrations. And then as the book progresses, I think in the middle, it's sort of from the house's vantage point. The house couldn't see anything or hear anything or smell anything.
There's
And
almost
so-
an anxiety
yeah,
to it.
it's the pace and the circumstances has really it's like the opposite of Brother Theophane, right? The Brother Theophane, like, all of a sudden goes from this drab world to this colored world, and the
Yes.
house is doing the opposite, right? It was in this beautiful country environment with all these beautiful smells and sights and
Right.
sounds, and then all of a sudden, the language is it couldn't hear anything, it couldn't see anything, it couldn't smell, it just, and so it was just like the life was really gone from this house just because of the circumstance and the pacing of the book. You can kind of feel that happening.
And it is, even the way the text is written, when you said that, I noticed at the beginning, the text is kind of playful looking, the way it's aligned on the page. And then it just becomes like centered.
Right.
Everything
Very
is centered.
utilitarian.
It is. I hadn't noticed that before.
I'm trying to find those lines,
But it is beautiful.
It is
and,
beautiful.
And it is, you lose the color as you get to the city. And then all of a sudden,
right. And then
when the
right,
house gets moved back.
the little house saw the green grass again, and it heard the birds singing, and it didn't feel sad. And so then, it's again this appreciation for this natural world, and all of the sights and sounds that come with that, and it's connecting to the great granddaughter, right? So it's just the idea of permanence, I think is really beautiful. And then it was spring again, and those are the last lines, and it was all quiet and peaceful in the country, right?
And I think if you're reading, if you and your student are reading this, yes, draw those things out. Talk about, what is it about spring? Why is it spring?
Right.
Well, spring is when things
Right.
come to life again.
Right.
Right.
That's
yes,
so
because
important
that's going
to
to be a
the little
theme
house.
all the way
Yes.
through their
Right.
education.
Yeah.
That's right. And yeah, even in the Storm book, that was something in that Storm book, in the read alouds in the first grade too, just, the sun, right? The presence of the sun,
Right.
and just when hopeful things happen, pointing those things out. And I don't think, I think you hit the nail on the head there by saying ask questions, because in this conversation we have a lot to say, like we have a lot to impart to the student, but the student is, these students are clever and they're observant, and they're interested in these books, and engage that interest by asking the question. Don't necessarily tell them everything. I mean,
Right.
let them draw these things out
Yeah.
and be the victors in pulling out these insights and making these connections. And I think that's one of the things that creates a person who loves to read.
Yeah,
That's right.
contemplative reader.
That's right.
Well, if you read about spring, you think of maybe Frog and Toad.
Oh,
Their
yes.
friendship revives
Right.
in the spring. It's the
Right.
spring of the year.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So there's another book that talks about the beauty of creation here, and wanting to make things beautiful, the legacy of a lifetime. And that's Miss Rumphius. And Tanya, I
Yes.
know you love Miss Rumphius.
I do. I really like Miss Rumphius. Well, so I feel like I've got a personal connection with her because she goes off and hurts her back
Yeah.
on a trip, which I did 3 years ago, and I'm still working through that. And it took her a long time to recover. But in the meantime, she is bedridden for a while, but she's planted these beautiful lupin flowers that she can see. And then she decides that she's going to plant them all over town. So she walks all over town.
Right.
And by doing that, she heals her back. That may not be what's happening here. It doesn't.
You're making this very
But
personal.
I think that I think this heals her. It says her back didn't hurt her anymore at all. And as my PT says, you have to just keep moving. So she got out of bed and she planted all those flowers.
But it's interesting because her little minute of suffering was kind of the thing that sort of initiated her recognition of the flowers.
Yes.
And, she was in bed just looking out the windows,
That's right.
And she didn't necessarily, she knew that she had to do 3 things in life,
That's
right? To
right.
honor her
3
grandmother.
The
her
number
grandfather,
3
right?
Yeah.
again.
So that's right. Number 3, but she had to, she was going to move to a faraway place, which I found interesting that she worked in a library first. And so maybe the library was sort of the impetus for
That's right.
where she wanted to go. Then
That's right.
Which she did. Then she
That's
wanted
right.
to live by the seaside. But then the most difficult thing was to make the world more beautiful.
Yes.
But it wasn't until she was immobilized that she even appreciated really the flowers, because she was
That's
looking
right.
out the window. She didn't know that was how she was going to make the world more beautiful, but providentially the birds and the wind blew
That's right.
blew the flowers to her, and she then recognized what she was called to do in order to honor her grandfather in this 3rd way.
Well, I think we need to
Yes.
pause and talk about wind here, because I think you might have something to say about wind in the willows and other things. I mean, there are things that we can,
Right.
perhaps we're overreading here, and I think that's fine to talk about. But in a lot of literature, wind, especially in Christian literature, and I don't know the state of Miss Rumphius, but wind can be Holy
Right.
Spirit kind of language. And so there is something I think you might be able to make some providential claims here.
Right.
That
Right.
this is actually due to some kind of God-given gift.
Right. Right.
And yes, and I mean, it's a science lesson.
That's
But
right.
the funny thing to me is the line, her back didn't hurt her anymore at all, which obviously really struck me. But then the next line is, now some people called her that crazy old lady. So yes, this book really spoke to me. So she does do the 3 things that she and her grandfather had decided that she needed to do with her life. And that also, I think, is pointing to those extended generations
Yes.
in a really important way, that how important it is to have that extended family beyond your immediate family, and what kind of influence those wiser people can be on your life, and the importance of them. I think that's something.
Well, and that's the Little House. The Little House is a generational
yes,
gift.
yes,
That's right.
I think
And,
that's
and the flowers also in the trees. I mean, so I think that's happening on 2 tiers, because it's happening in the family relationship there, but it's
In the
also
natural
happening
world.
in the natural world, right? These flowers are a gift that she is
Yes.
giving the next generation in order to honor her grandfather, or her was it her grand?
I think it's her
her
grandfather.
grandfather, right? And then isn't her granddaughter at the end sort of yes. And so
And
the
there's
whole
a
time,
charge to
right.
her.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. And so it's just sort of
Well,
this responsibility.
no, it's her great niece.
Great niece,
because
right.
she never married.
Right. So then it's it's this line of continuum,
Yes.
right?
Well,
Which
the
is
end is her as an old lady,
Right.
with all
Right.
these children
Right.
around her,
right.
that she was then influencing and telling them, you have to go on and do something wonderful, make
Right.
the world a more wonderful place. So it just continues on and on.
That's right.
That's it. Right.
It's
I
a
think
beautiful book.
It
And
is
does
a beautiful book.
I think this might end the year. I think
I
this
think
is
it
the
does.
last one.
Yeah.
And so it's a really great way to end in the spring. You're tired, but just to send those children out
Well,
with the notion that you need to do something with your life that makes the world a more wonderful place.